Hi, what's happening? It's Mickle the Pickle. Today we are talking about stick welding electrodes, or as the pros call them, rods. You can tell I'm not a pro. This video intends to give you basic information that's easy to understand. This is why I'm not mentioning specialty rods. Things like 110-18, 70-14, etc. If you have anything to add, leave it down in the comments. Alright, let's get on. I'm gonna see if I can flip this in post. So, does pen work? Yeah. So there's three main kinds of stick welding electrodes that we use commonly. There is 70-18 or 70-16. There is 60-13. And then there is 60-10. You might be looking at these numbers and asking yourself, like, what the hell do these mean? So I'll try my best to explain. This welding electrode is called 70-16. Stick welding electrodes usually have between 4 and 5 numbers. Occasionally there'll be a dash and a number indicating additional information about the electrode. On a 4-digit electrode, which is most commonly seen, the first 2 numbers indicate the tensile strength of the steel used. This number indicates the pounds per square inch that the rod can stand. 70 in this case referring to 70,000 psi. 70,000 pounds per square inch means that if I took this rod and I melted it down to make a 1 by 1 inch rod and I pulled it apart, it would take at least 70,000 pounds to pull it apart. The third number refers to the position or positions that you can weld in. 1 refers to all positions: flat, horizontal, vertical, and overhead. 2 refers to flat and horizontal only. 3 refers to just flat, and there's other denominations, but you don't really have to worry about them. I've never seen a higher than a 2 on an electrode. The final number refers to the flux composition. You won't really need to know specifically what's in it, but you might be able to tell this has the same number as this, so it might behave similar. Generally, I don't focus on that at all. I try and remember the specific effects of each rod. I should note, occasionally you'll come across a 5-digit electrode. And this means that the first 3 digits refer to the tensile strength. So you might have 110-18, which is occasionally seen. This means it's 110, at least 110 pounds per square inch pulling force. First rod we'll look at, 60-13. From the numbers, we can tell this is a rod that requires at least 60,000 psi to pull apart, can be used in all positions, and whatever that means. Advantages: easy to learn, good looking welds. Whatever, I couldn't quite fit welds in there, but you get what I'm. Easy to weld thin metal. 60-13 has a low penetration, meaning it doesn't fuse that deep through the material. This is one of its main drawbacks. Low penetration. Low pen. One advantage not talked about is 60-13 is very cheap. Hard. With 60-13 it can be difficult to see the puddle and know exactly what you're doing. Seeing the puddle is very important in welding if you want to do it correctly. This is why I own a $400 welding hood. It's not to protect my eyes. I could get a $40 welding hood. It's just I couldn't see what I was doing. Another advantage of 60-13, it doesn't require any sort of special storage. Had a little bit of a mishap there with the camera, no problem. Another disadvantage of 60-13, it is a little bit brittle. Hope I spelled that right, I don't think I did. On to the next electrode. My favorite, 70-16. Alright, just like before, 70,000 pounds per square inch, can weld in all positions, doesn't matter about the 6, don't worry about that right now. Advantages: strong, relatively cheap, common. Because 7016 is a low hydrogen electrode, it'll bend more before it snaps, so it's less brittle. I apologize for my spelling. You're just gonna have to deal with it. Another advantage of 7016, there's a clear puddle. It's easier to weld vertical and overhead with 7016 than 6013 because 6013 freezes slower. That's why it gives you such a nice weld. 7016 takes a little longer to freeze, so it's easier. Disadvantages of 7016. Requires, in some circumstances, a rod oven to keep them from getting too moist. For most of us though, doesn't really matter. Back to the advantages side. Medium penetration. More expensive. Here in Australia, 7016 costs quite a bit more than 6013. With 7016 in particular, this isn't including 7018, even though this list is for pretty much all of the low hydrogen electrodes. The slag can be a little glossy. I think that's it. Next oh, don't you dare fall again, freaking camera. Next electrode, 6011 or 6010. Just like before, we can tell 60,000 psi, one all positions, and the other one, or the zero, no one cares. 6011 can be run on AC. 6010 cannot be run on AC, so don't try it. This is another benefit of 6013, can be run on AC. 6010 and 6011 freeze fast. This means it's easy to weld vertical and overhead. 6010 and 6011 are high penetration rods, so you really don't have much of a question whether your joint is strong. Another advantage of 6010 and 6011, low amperage. 7016 requires about 125 amps for an 1/8 inch or 3.2 mil rod. 6013 might require a little bit more than that, especially on AC, but 6011 requires in the 80s or 90s of amps, meaning that you can get a cheaper welder and or weld some heavy rods using a low amperage welder. Disadvantages, here's where we really see the downfall of 6010 and 6011. Ugly welds. 6010 and 6011, because they freeze fast, every little motion you make creates an indent in and you'll be able to see it in the final weld. These rods can be difficult to run. In fact, most moderately priced welding machines struggle quite a bit with 6010. This is why so many people use 6011 on DC welding machines. Hard to weld thin metal. Because these rods are high penetration, their arc is hot and it'll melt through anything. Another disadvantage, a little bit brittle. Coming back to advantages, a huge advantage of 6010 and 6011 is they can burn through paint, rust, oil, stuff like that. It's always a good idea to make sure what you're welding is clean, but if worst comes to worst, you can. I spelled dirty as dritty, okay, don't judge me. So where does this leave us? I personally like to use 7016 for the majority of my work. Then I rarely use 6013, and I use 6011 for welding old stuff, and I just occasionally use it for vertical welds, etc. If I was welding a load-bearing part, I'd use 7016, especially if you're welding something like a trailer, a lift, anything that has the potential to have a sudden load. I wouldn't risk it with anything other than a low hydrogen electrode. Alright, first rod, 6013, 1/8 inch, 3.2 mil. I'm gonna run this at about 130 amps. Shields down. Next rod, 670/16. I'm gonna run this at 125 amps. Lag melting everywhere. I'm just gonna chip this. Alright, next rod. 60/11. Alright, I'm gonna weld this at 90 amps. Alright, that did not go that well. Alright, so here are the 3 welds. We can see how nice and consistent the 60/13 weld is. We have the 70/16 weld. It's alright. I'm a little out of practice with stick welding. And then we have the 60/11 weld, which is not particularly great, but that's because I didn't do any oscillation. But your 60/10 and 60/11 welds won't really tend to look that nice. I think that's everything. Thanks for watching. See you next time. End screen, pop up, check out some of my other videos.